Hi everybody, welcome to our first watercolor lesson. It's the first of 4 classes. It's part of a Manitoba Government initiative called Safe at Home. First of all, I would just like to thank the Arts Council and especially Allison who has put this together. And the first thing that you're going to be able to do is pick up, and by now you probably will have already picked up, your kit, which is a Royal Langnickel Essentials watercolor set, which includes paper and brushes and paint and a little palette and a pencil and an eraser. And I'm just going to show you how to use all this stuff as we paint a picture together each week. So first of all, we are going to use half a sheet of paper each week. And the reason for that is that a whole piece of paper is kind of intimidating, and we're going to do some fairly detailed artwork, and it will take a long time if we were to use a full sheet, but you are each going to get, I think there's 10 sheets of paper in there. We'll only be using 2 sheets during this. And also there's a lot of paint. It takes a long time to go through a tube of paint. So make sure that when the classes are over that you hang on to the materials, because there are going to be more classes offered and you will have an opportunity to use the paper and the paints and the other materials throughout the next set of lessons. First of all, with paper and water, water tends to make paper buckle a little bit and warp. So the first thing we have to do is we're going to tape our paper onto a board. So the first thing we're going to do is fold our paper in half, and then with a pair of scissors, we're going to cut it in half to get our first piece of paper. Just cut it along the fold. Then, there's 2 sides to the paper. One side is more textured than the other. Put it so that the textured side is up. Then, we're going to tape it to the board. And what we need to do is get the tape to go all the way across the top and the sides and the bottom. Old tape tends to be a little bit dry, so this tape seems to be shredding a little bit, so we're going to have to be really careful when I tear this off. Technical difficulties, but it doesn't do any harm to know all this stuff. So here's for this side, and it goes down the whole side and across the whole top. And we never remove the tape until our painting is entirely dry, because that keeps the paper from staying warped. When it dries, it will go back to flat because it's been taped down. Okay, and this is the last piece, and it's going to go across the bottom. All right, so now we're about to begin our painting. You're going to have a palette, and we're only going to use 4 colors today. You're also going to have a jar of water, and make it not too tiny, because when you wash your brushes, you don't want your water to get dirty, because dirty water isn't really dirty water. The water takes on the paint that rinses out of the brushes, and if the water has a lot of paint in it, it will stain your paper. So you want to make sure your water stays clean. You have 3 brushes in your kit. You have a largish brush, a medium brush, and a small brush. When you first get these brushes, they're going to be hard. So you're going to have to moisten them in water, and that will take whatever the sizing is out of it so that it will soften up. You also should have a piece of paper towel or toilet paper handy. That's kind of a good thing to have. And a pencil and an eraser is included with your kit. The first thing we're going to do, I'm going to show you what inspired me to do this picture. This is the picture that we're going to do. I was just driving along the road and I thought, I just want a simple country landscape, something with a little bit of distance so that you would be able to see that as you go back in distance, that colors fade out. And as they get closer, the colors become sharper. And that's called atmospheric perspective. As you go back in space, there's air between you and the distance. And the air is the same air that makes the blue sky. So it kind of blues out the distant trees. And as you get closer, they become darker and sharper. So I always make a little plan before I do a class. And this was my little picture that I did from this. It's never exactly the same as the landscape that I took because you as an artist, you kind of change it to make it work the way you want it to. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our pencil and we're going to draw a horizon line a third of the way down. So you just imagine that this is, a chocolate bar in 3 pieces. Now, it doesn't have to be totally straight. You don't use a ruler or anything. So there is the sky. Now, that's simple. Did you see that? I'm not doing it too dark, but there's a straight line. Usually when we draw on our watercolor paper, we don't draw with a heavy line because we don't really want our lines to show. And I never erase them afterwards. They're always just part of the picture. So then, we're going to take our largish brush. No, first we're going to mix up our sky color. Now you're going to be putting it on the palette that's provided. The palette has a little seal over it to keep the colors fresh. So handy dandy scissors, we're just going to jab it. This seal is very strong. There we go. And I don't like to waste paint, so I'm just going to wash it onto here. Look at that lovely color. This is called Prussian blue. And you know that bit I got on the scissors? That's all I need. That's all I need for now. So I'm just going to use the brush here and get some water, and I'm going to add some water to what I just had on my pair of scissors. Isn't that crazy? And it's still probably plenty dark. So then, the next color that we're going to use, and there's a bit stuck out the top, so I'm just going to put it over here. But it's not mixed up with the water, you see? I just put it there at the edge. These slope so that the water's going to be down in the deep end of the pool and the blob of paint is going to be on the land. So the next one is going to be burnt sienna. And I'm going to wash off that bit of paint I got on the scissors. I don't want that to get in. Burnt sienna is a great color. It's kind of a reddish brown color. And again, there's enough paint on the brush that I am just going to scoop that in there. You see that nice reddish brown color? Now I'm going to tell you about this. Watercolor is, we never paint it straight on. Very, very, very rarely do we ever paint it straight on. Watercolor is called watercolor because it is mostly water. And I never wash my palette. The reason for that is that once the palette gets dry, it's still good because watercolor is water soluble. All you do is add water, and then the next time you paint a picture, you don't even have to put paint in your palette half the time. There's a little bit left there, so I'm going to put it up here on land, and we're going to do our sky. Now, it's really difficult to mix paint with the amount of water you need on this palette. So, ice cream lid, and I find I just use the smaller yogurt lids at home. So use an ice cream lid, and what we're going to do is we are going to add some water over here, and my brush still had a little burnt sienna in it, and that's okay because I'm going to mix it with burnt sienna, and I'm also going to dip it into the cobalt or the Prussian blue. Now we're ending up with kind of a brownish color, a bluish brownish color. And I have a piece of paper here. I'm just going to test it so that you can see what it looks like. See how it's kind of like, I could even add a little bit more brown to that because what we want to do is we're looking for a gray color. So I add a little bit more, and now it's more of a gray color. And it's pale. Notice it's very, very pale because the sky in this picture is going to be quite pale. So now we're going to wet the brush, the biggest brush, and you remember that third that you drew for the sky? We're just going to paint that with water. So far, so good, right? This isn't very intimidating. Painting with water is easy. If you make a mistake, let it dry, right? So you're going to notice that the paper is going to start to warp a little bit. But don't let that worry you because you won't take your tape off until it is flattened off. And it will flatten after it dries. So now we're going to have our grayish blue sky. So watch and see what happens. I'm just going to put some paint on here, and I'm going to put it from side to side, so we're working from side to side, and the paint is just going to blend and run on the paper. It's kind of a cloudy gray day, and we're just painting the part we wet. And then we're just going to let it dry. But before we let it dry, we have to put our little far bushes. You see how the sky is here? And then over here, we have some little bushes that are really far away. So you're not going to have any detail. And remember, I talked about atmospheric perspective. They are going to be kind of a bluish, grayish color at the distance. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of the water that the paint that we've already mixed up, and we're going to make another little bit of a blue, but it's a little bit stronger this time because it's going to be stronger than the sky, but it's still going to be a little bluish gray. And then we're just going to dab it along the edge. And as we dab it along the edge, you will see it start to spread, just like little tree branches at a distance. And don't be too particular, and don't be too even. Let it spread out, and just go to about half of the page. You see, it's starting to look like a little forest off in the distance. Now this is starting to pool in here, so I'm just going to see what happens when I turn it like this. Can you see how it's starting to run down? Okay, so now we're going to let that dry for a minute, but while it's drying, we're going to take our pencil and we're going to draw a little line that starts here, and it's going to slope up towards the top like a very long, skinny piece of pie. And then it's going to join up with the land. So you end up with a long, skinny piece of land. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take yellow ochre. And we're going to open this. Jab it with our scissors again. And then we'll put a little bit of yellow ochre on here. I put it on the high part. And then I'm going to put a little bit of clean water in here. Put about a little bit of clean water right in here. Notice I have yellow ochre here. There, I've got a little pool of water, and now I'm just going to take a little bit of paint. A little bit of paint goes a long way. If you want paint to be lighter, then you use water. Then we're going to take that middle-sized brush, this one, and it's already wet, so we've got all the sizing off it so it's not too hard. And we're going to take that yellow ochre and we're just going to paint, and it's nice and weak. I like this. This is nice and weak because it's still at a distance. And we're just making some yellow streaks. Remember, this is a winter picture, so there's going to be some snow still on the field here. So we're going to leave little bits of white here and there. There we go. And it sort of stops. It doesn't go all the way to the end because it's a landform that's kind of moving out into the distance, and then it's gone. And so this is still just the sky and the horizon. And this over here, already we've got a nice little landscape started. We've got a sky, we've got the distant hill, the distant trees, and then we've got this field that is just kind of fading off into the horizon. Okay, I'll let you do that. I'll stop it for now, and you can work on that for a couple of minutes, and then we'll start again when you're ready. Well, now your distant field should be dry. Now we're going to take our pencil again, and we're going to draw a very gentle slope again, which is showing another layer of land. So it's about, I'd say about 3/4 of an inch over here and about 1/2 an inch over here. So it's kind of like a gentle rolling landscape. And what we're going to do next is we'll take our largest brush and we'll go back into our bluish gray, very, very, very pale bluish gray. And we're just going to do a gentle little painting of this area. So it's very gentle bluish gray. And I'm leaving little bits of white to show because it is winter, and so some areas of snow are going to be lighter than others. And after I've got that painted in, then I'm going to take it over to my blow dryer and let that dry. Watercolor is kind of a tug of war between dry and wet. And sometimes you want things to be wet so that they work really well mixing together. And sometimes you want it to be dry so that your paint doesn't move or your paint doesn't bleed into areas you don't want it to. So this is the time we're going to dry it. So now we're going to take our pencil and make another line, starting in this area, just about 1 inch below the last line you drew, and we're going to slope the line down. We're going to slope it down towards the bottom of the page, leaving it about 1 inch to 1.5 inches from the bottom of the page. So I hope you can see that line. Now we're going to take our largest brush again, and we're going to add a bit more water because we're going to lighten up this area a little bit. And we're just going to paint this area here with a very pale gray. So basically we're working our way forward from the background. We're starting at the very background and we're moving forward. And we do all this before we do any details. After we've done that, then we're going to take that to the blow dryer. So we always have to make sure that it's dry before we do the next step. Well, now that the landscape is painted and dried, we'll continue to paint in this tree. I'm still using the very finest brush that we have. And I'm not pressing very hard because I want my line to be nice and thin. And I always tell people when you're painting trees, just think about them as being the letter Y. So see how I'm going to make the letter Y here? And I'm going to make the letter Y here. And you just keep making Ys. And as you get closer to the top, you make smaller Ys. And the bigger branches are bigger Ys. And don't worry about crossing lines because they always crisscross. And we're just going to keep painting Ys, keep painting them and painting them until you feel that you have a lot of branches on your trees. They're starting to take shape now. Now I'm just starting to add little branches here and there. This tree still has the appearance of lots of gray and blue because it is still at a distance. It's not very close up to the viewer. So we just keep on using that grayish blue color. And you just keep on making little Ys everywhere. After a while, they don't look like Ys anymore. A little watercolor goes a long way. These little tubes that you got, they should last you for months and months and months, even if you paint a lot. Sometimes I like to have some little branches growing out from beside the trees because these are wild trees out in the middle of a field. Nobody planted them, so they kind of branch out on their own and start little baby trees. After you get your trees all done, this tree, then we are going to be painting some grass. Now in this picture, we have a lot a lot of grass that's sticking up from out of the snow. And it's kind of seems to follow a band. I don't know why. It may be just a little bit longer there, or maybe there's not as much snow there as there is in other spots, but you can see it sticking out all over the snow. This area here is still pretty plain, so we're not going to really do much with that. But now, on my picture that I did, I put in some grasses along here. So you're going to use your yellow ochre, which is this color, and you're going to take your yellow ochre and your thinnest brush, and you're going to go along just in this area here, just where we saw the band of grass before. You might have to make it a little bit stronger by getting some paint from the part that you squirted on the high area. And I was going to say, after our lesson is done, do not wash your palette, because all you need to do is add water next time we get together. You can also add a little bit of this burnt sienna, and that just makes it more of a deeper gold. It won't change it too much, but it keeps it from just being too garish. So then you're going to paint from the ground up. You see how just little grassy strokes. And you just go along painting these little grassy strokes by dipping your brush in that yellow ochre mixed with a bit of burnt sienna. And you're just going to be going along. This is nice if you're at home working on this, and I know you've got me tuned in and you want to hear my wonderful talking voice, but it's kind of nice when you have music in the background. And you just kind of lose yourself in the music and you know, draw grass along with the music, because it can kind of get a bit tedious drawing grass. I'm adding a little bit more yellow to it just to vary it a little bit. And then as it dries, you can go back in and overlap a little bit. In the photograph, which I will show you again, we've got an area that's quite thick, and then we have areas that are very sparse. And so we're going to try to vary it like that, so that we have some areas that are pretty thick and some areas that are sparse. But remember to keep your brush strokes light. Remember just to kind of tickle the paper with the brush. You don't press very hard at all, because if you press hard, then you end up with a very thick line, and you want to keep it thin like grass. So we're going to just keep going here, and we're just going to kind of work away, and I'll just let you keep working at that, and I will turn off this videotape for a minute just to give you a chance to work on that, and I'll turn back on in a minute. Well, I've been working away at the grass, and I got most of the main part of the grass done. I have done quite a few layers. I'll go back in here and do some more overlapping. And then I have just kind of gradually moved off to the right. It's kind of like a long skinny triangle, sort of like this long skinny triangle over here. Now, in the photograph that I usually like to really look at the photograph and see what's happening with the photograph. There's little clumps of grasses here and there now, but they're not very regular. They're kind of just here and there. So we just kind of do a few little grasses coming out from the main body of the grass, and it's really tempting to get really regular. But remember, nature isn't very regular. It just kind of does its thing. And so you want to make sure that you don't have, you know, doinga, 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 all like four blades of grass and then a space, and then 4 blades of grass and a space. We want to try to just have a little bit here and there, sometimes just maybe 1 or 2 little strokes of grass, and maybe large areas without any grass at all. Because this is grass that's sticking out of the snow. So they're just going to be little short little pieces of grass. And I think that's enough. A little goes a long way. And every once in a while, I'm just going to do another bit of grass here and there. It's a little bit thicker where I am here, because in the photograph that was kind of a thick band of grass. And then it sparses out a little bit more. And I try to have a few pieces of grass sticking up above this little hill that we've drawn. It kind of covers the line and makes for a little bit of an irregular line, because we try to be irregular as much as we can. And it's hard to be irregular because we spend most of our life trying to do everything in a regular way. So I'll let you work on that for a minute. Well, now that our grass is all dry, we're going to get on to the next step of the picture, which is going to be our nearest tree. Now, if you look at this picture right here, you can see that this tree is much darker and more detailed than this bluff of trees. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our smallest brush, and I have added a little bit more burnt sienna and Prussian blue to my palette. And I'm going to dip into the color rather than the water jar, because now I don't want to dilute my colors too much. So now I'm going to mix up, and you can see for yourself how dark it's looking. It's almost black. And now I'm going to be dipping into, rather than the water jar, I'm going to dip into the wash that I have made. And when I take my test paper, look at how it has become much darker. It could even be a bit darker. So save your yogurt tins or tops, because they're very, very handy for making washes and mixing. All right, so now that we've got our color mixed nice and strongly, then we're going to start painting our verticals on our bush, and we're going to go right up through the other bush, and you can see that because the color is much darker, that you're going to be able to see it against the background. If it was not strong enough, you would lose these strong verticals that you want to be right in the foreground. This is the part that the viewer would see as the closest up. And we want the color to be strong, and we want the color to be easily seen. So we'll just keep painting, and just like you did with the other bluff of trees, just keep doing your verticals and making Ys. And you just keep painting until you're pretty happy and satisfied that you have a bluff that is close by and strong, and that shows up well against the background. Sometimes you might want to expand the width of a branch just to make it stronger and to add a little variety, because remember, we want things to be not too regular. Here's another Y I'm making here, and we just keep making more Ys as we go. So I'll let you keep working on that for a minute. So now we're going to, you notice that the tree is all done, and now we're going to work on our fence post. The fence post is just on the lower left-hand corner, and we are going to use our strong colors for that because it's close up. I'm going to add a little bit of brown to that, just to make it a little bit browner and less blue, less black. I'm going to I'm going to take the brown and make some irregular kind of lines along the fence post. Because watercolor is transparent, you will be able to see the brown beneath, and it just adds, the paint just adds another layer of strength. And for your final part of the picture, you're going to take your pencil and you're going to make a line, which is your wire, and you're going to just have it come like this, lightly pencil it in, and then another line here. And using our finest brush, we're going to use burnt sienna, because it's going to be kind of rusty, and it's going to be a very weak line because we don't want it to take over the whole picture. Then very carefully, we're going to use just the tip of our brush and make the line representing the fencing. You can hardly see it. And there is your simple country landscape. I hope you enjoy it, and see you next week. A fence post, and it's going to overlap. It's going to be about as wide as your finger, and it's going to overlap the grassy areas. You're going to use your smallest brush, and I want you to paint in a line, leave a space, paint in another line, leave a space, and paint in another line. And we're going to let that dry. And while that dries, we're going to make some little fence posts over here, fencing in this little distant field. Just making little lines here. As it goes away from us, we're going to make the fence posts a little tiny bit closer together and a little shorter. And we're going to let this dry, and then we're going to go back in. It wasn't quite dry enough. And you're going to see some lines start to form there. Now that we've got our color mixed nice and strongly, then we're going to start painting our verticals on our bush. And we're going to go right up through the other bush. And you can see that because the color is much darker, that you're going to be able to see it against the background. If it was not strong enough, you would lose these strong verticals that you want to be right and in the foreground. This is the part that the viewer would see as the closest up. And we want the color to be strong, and we want the color to be easily seen. So we'll just keep painting, and just like you did with the other bluff of trees, just keep doing your verticals and making Ys. And you just keep painting until you're pretty happy and satisfied that you have a bluff that is close by and strong, and that shows up well against the background. Sometimes you might want to expand the width of a branch just to make it stronger and to add a little variety, because remember, we want things to be not too regular. Here's another Y I'm making here, and we just keep making more Ys as we go. So I'll let you keep working on that for a minute. So those two lines that I did have to be totally dry for this little bit of magic to work. Now I'm going to take this same brown and maybe just change it up a little wee bit so it's a bit darker. And I'm going to make another line, and I'm going to kind of overlap the other lines that I just did there and one over here. And what happens is a little line starts to form that you didn't draw. And that is because watercolor is transparent. And if you paint over watercolor that's already there, it's going to show because it's transparent. So some people find that that's a little bit scary because you can't really cover up a mistake by adding more paint. So because it's transparent, you can always see what was there before. But you can make that work by having a little line and overlapping it. The other line still shows, and it gives you a really nice effect. So we're going to let that dry, and then we are going to take that pencil and we are just going to have our wire. We're going to draw it in with pencil, and it's going to slope this way. And then we'll do another piece of wire here, and it goes right off the page. Now, drawing in wire, painting in wire can be very scary because it's so thin. So you want to be really, really careful to use the finest brush in the world, and you are going to use your burnt sienna, the weak burnt sienna that's right in there. And you're just going to, the reason why we're using burnt sienna is we're going to just say it is rusty. And you can go all the way across if you want to, or you can have the wire on the back. And you have to support your arm on the table to make sure that you have lots of support, because you're just doing the very lightest line you can. And then this one and this one. So that is basically a simple rural Manitoba landscape. And it shows perspective, and as things go further away, they're smaller. As they come closer, they're larger. Look at the difference between this fence post and those fence posts. We learn about atmospheric perspective, where things in the distance are gray and lighter and fainter, and as they get closer, they get darker. And also, as they get closer, they have more detail. The grass in this area is very much more detailed than the grass in this area. So it's a very simple country landscape. And next week, we're going to do another country landscape using a different area of the province and a little bit different kind of sky. So I look forward to next week when we'll do a different landscape. Thank you for your patience. See you next week.